Welcome, welcome, welcome to the very first of its kind live teaching class of McKee Foods Wellness Healthy Habits. I am Jonathan Hill, the Gentry Plant Wellness Coordinator, and it is a privilege to be here and share in this opportunity to walk alongside you and guide you through this process. Now, I would like to mention before we get started, I will be taking pauses throughout this lecture to make sure that we have time for questions, make sure people are digesting the content, as well as making sure not too many folks' eyes are glazed over. Okay, so without further ado, I'll give you a little background of who I am. Okay, your facilitator. So I'm Jonathan, as I mentioned earlier. This is my wonderful family, my beautiful wife Elise, my precious baby girl Alea, who is turning 15 months this week. So I'm excited about that. And when it comes to my work, right, in my pursuit of excellence, I always try to make sure that I am walking in the purpose that God has called me to walk in, as well as be honoring to my family. So hopefully throughout the course of these 4 weeks, I don't fail you on those metrics. So a little bit about my educational background. I graduated from the University of Arkansas in 2019 with a bachelor's in human nutrition. I'm also an ACE certified personal trainer with 2 specialist certifications in functional training and sports nutrition. Okay, and I would like to say it is not my intent over the course of these 4 weeks to push anything on anybody to make you adopt something that you're uncomfortable adopting. I'm simply providing the best education and science backed by research to make sure that you can make an informed decision when the time comes. All right? So, a little disclaimer of who I am not. I am not a registered dietitian, I'm not a doctor, and I'm not a scientist. Okay, so I'm going to stay within my scope of practice. So when it comes to questions down the line, I'm going to remain in my scope. Try to answer them to the best of my ability, but this is just to protect me and to protect you. Okay, so if you have any pre-existing or underlying health conditions, please see your healthcare provider or talk to your doctor about a reference to see a registered dietitian. Okay, and I want to encourage you, everything that I say in these classes, please test them yourself, do your own research, and adopt a careful evidence-based approach to this information and just any science that you come across down the road, okay? All right. Now, I must give credit to where credit is due, right? So before we hop into it, this is Dr. Jessie Inchauspe. She is a French biochemist, okay? And her research, and specifically these 2 pieces of literature here, have helped shape and round my approach to nutrition, food in general, how the body processes and is affected by foods, and really made everything meld together. So, what is glucose? We hear that word a lot. What is it? Okay? Bless you. For you science nerds out there, glucose is a molecule with 6 carbons, 12 hydrogens, and 6 oxygens. It's a long branch chain molecule, right? So what it is it is derived from starch and sugar. So when the body processes these molecules, it breaks it down into glucose. Glucose is used for our daily processes, energy, even just getting up and down throughout the day, right? We have to have energy. It has to be derived from somewhere. Okay, that's where glucose comes into play. All right? So, some examples of this will look like white pasta and white rice. What are these? They're simple carbohydrates. What are simple carbohydrates? Glucose. Okay? So we want to make sure we make this connection. Simple carbohydrates versus complex carbohydrates. Brown rice and brown pasta. The only difference between simple and complex is that one is quickly absorbed in the body and one is slowly absorbed in the body. Okay? The faster the, more quickly it is absorbed, makes it a simple carbohydrate. Okay? The slower it is absorbed, makes it a complex carbohydrate. All right? So just a visual example. All right. Now, We need to know what the body does when it absorbs glucose. Okay? In order to better understand this, we need to talk about a very important organ in the body called the pancreas. Okay? The pancreas, what does it do? It produces insulin. Why is insulin important? Because insulin helps moderate the intake of glucose in the body. Okay? Well, let's put it into an analogy. We can look at insulin as being a doorman or a bodyguard, okay, to a club or to, a hotel. There are certain people on the guest list. They only let in a certain amount of people, right? Insulin does the same thing with glucose. It only takes in what our body needs. But if it's overflowed, okay, or overloaded, what is one doorman going to do with a stampede of 100 people? Nothing. He's going to become a doormat, right? That's essentially what happens to our insulin. Okay, when we eat a lot of starchy and sugary foods at once, without anything to help balance it, our doorman is ran over. Hence, we get insulin resistance, we get pre and type 2 diabetes, high blood sugar, high cholesterol, etc., etc. Okay? So, here's just a list of things that can affect our body when our glucose is overran. Okay? So, another way to talk about these instances of our insulin being overran is to call it a glucose spike. Okay? Glucose spike, you'll hear that a lot through the course of these 4 weeks, is what happens when our glucose is not kept in check. All right? These are also some instances of which I've also experienced personally myself. All right? So it's not very fun, and I'm sure you wouldn't see a lot of hands raised who want to experience any of these things, right? All right. So let's get into a physical example, right? We talked about simple and complex carbohydrates. Here's an example of a simple carbohydrate, which is white bread, and a complex carbohydrate, which is sourdough bread. Okay, now I would like to point out these graphs that you see. Miss Jessie, what she does is she takes the research that's been provided from the scientific community and she applies it to herself. How does she do this? She wears a continuous glucose monitor on herself, and she eats these foods, and it reads what her body does in response to eating these foods. So she's not only just talking the talk, she's walking the walk, and that's one thing that I can appreciate and helps validate her reasoning behind this method. Okay? So let's dive into this graph a little bit because you will be seeing several of these throughout the course of this class, all right? So the top portion, you have a red bar, okay? That's categorized as a glucose spike zone, okay? The green underneath is where we want our glucose to be. It's more regulated, right? It's not as big of a spike and as big of a crash. And we can categorize that crash as being a slow, sluggish feeling, headaches, inflammation in the stomach, bloating, etc., okay? That's just what happens when this glucose reaches this red zone here. All right? Now, I provided a lot of science. So, if you've fallen asleep, now is the time to catch you guys up. So, are there any questions so far with this content that we talked about? Any questions? Okay. All right. So, let's dive a little bit into the research and evidence portion. In a very recent study concluded in 2022, it was shown that only 7 to 12% of Americans were metabolically healthy. 7 to 12%. Okay, that's a very, very, very low percentage. Right? And you can see the effects of this metabolic unhealth with these categories below. Give you a second to read over those. All right. Let's dive into some more categories here. All right. So now we have a bar graph here. These are showing the percentage of optimal metabolic health in America. Okay. So as you can see, there's different categories: age, education, race, physical activity. All right. The longer the bar, the more optimal the metabolic health. The shorter the bar, the less. Okay. I would also like to point out one of my biggest motivators for this course, for this research, and just applying this method in general is seeing this firsthand in my family. All right. There, underneath the race portion of this, you'll see that the non-Hispanic black population has the lowest percentage of optimal metabolic health in America. Okay. And that is across the board. And it's unfortunate to say, I have witnessed the unchecked and unfiltered power of metabolic unhealth, metabolic syndrome, and what it does to people, what it does to family. And this research has given me hope and insight into providing that for my family personally. And hopefully it does the same for you guys. All right. Now, I'm not trying to be the bearer of bad news, right? I want to also encourage you guys. That's one of the things I want to be accomplished in this class, is that I'm educating, yes, but I'm also motivating and inspiring you. All right. So we can change this upward trend in metabolic syndrome. How do we do that? We have to keep our internal plumbing humming, right? We have to feed our gut what it wants and what it needs. Okay, so we have to pay attention to the food that we eat. All right. Now, one thing I do want to point out, this is going to be very crucial for us moving forward and adopting new habits. All right. So, tiny habits. What are those? I also call them baby steps. Why? Because baby steps are still steps. Tiny habits become habits. And we are all habitual creatures. All right. So what is a tiny habit? Tiny habit is broken down into 3 categories: the anchor moment, the new tiny habit, and the instant celebration. And I'm going to go shortly into these, why they're important and vital into adopting new behavior. Okay. So first, we have our anchor moment. What is an anchor moment? Anchor moment ties our new behavior, what we want to adopt, into our daily lifestyle. Okay, let's say we wake up in the morning, brush our teeth, take a shower, put on our clothes in no particular order, right? And then we go make ourselves a pot of coffee, all right? These are all habits that we do on a daily basis. It's like clockwork. We don't even think about it, right? Okay, but there's a new behavior that we want to adopt. What is that? Let's say it's drinking a cup of water. Okay, so let's also scale that down a little bit. Not a full cup, a half cup. The more simple, the better, right? We can all agree that the simpler something is, the more likely we're going to do it. Okay, so half a cup of water. Now let's sandwich that half a cup of water in between 2 of those anchor moments. Finishing putting on our shoes and making ourselves a pot of coffee. All right, so because it's anchored in there, we're hopefully, the goal is to remember to do that habit. Now, that's not the end all be all, right? Because we still have the instant celebration. All right. Why is instant celebration important? It's because we never want to neglect the wins. All right. We have to acknowledge the wins. What does that mean? Okay. Well, looking at it from a scientific standpoint, in our brain, a chemical is released called dopamine when something pleasurable happens. Okay. So if you think about celebration is a pretty pleasurable thing to do, right? Celebrating graduation, a birth, a marriage, a football game, etc., etc. It creates this dopamine in our brain, and we want to go back to what that was, that good feeling that we had, right? Okay, so when we have an instant celebration, whether it be a pat on the back, whether it be a woo, or whether it be you're doing a dance party in the kitchen and nobody's watching, you got the music blaring, whatever that is going to help you come back to that tiny behavior, which is the ultimate goal. Okay? And this creates success. One success leads to more success. All right? Okay. Now, if you don't remember anything else that I say over the course of these next 3 weeks, anything at all, this slide right here, this one right here, is by far the most important. Why? It is the foundation of the glucose method to which all of this research, all of this education is based off of, okay? None of it will be sustainable if we did not have this order of eating, okay? So order of eating, why is that important? Because when our body breaks down food, it matters the order in which we eat it, okay? We'll start at the top. We'll start with fiber. Fiber first. And I'm not talking about fiber that has starch. I'm not talking about fiber that has sugar, okay, including fruit. I'm talking about a non-starchy, non-sugary fiber. What does fiber do? When the fiber is broken down into our body, it helps with the digestive enzymes, which help slow the digestion rate of everything else that comes after it, okay? So if we can slow down our digestion, we can make our digestion more efficient, thus decreasing the glucose spike, all right? Next, protein. Can be plant-based, can be animal-based, okay, right? No partiality there. We go down to fat. Preferably, if following this method, we look at avocados, nuts, and seeds, right? Omega-3 heavy foods. And then at the bottom, we have starch and sugar, which we talked about before. Simple carbohydrates, very quickly absorbed into the body, thus causing glucose spikes, okay? So, if you want to, draw a line in between the first three and the last two. A line separating those things, okay? That way, we can really see the importance of why the first three are so vital to our digestion and how our body runs versus the second two and how one affects the other, okay? Now, we talked about graphs before. Here are a couple examples of how eating fiber first, non-starchy, non-sugary fiber first, affects our glucose spikes in the body, okay? An example of pasta and broccoli, salad and lasagna, okay? Just consuming these things first is absolutely wild how much that it affects us. But it does, okay? Our bodies work like that. All right. Any questions so far? All right. All right, here's some fiber options. Okay, we have Brussels sprouts, we have broccoli, we have pickles. Yes, you can pickle your vegetables. It doesn't just have to be raw. Okay, you also bake your vegetables, saute them. Veggies don't have to be bland, right? They can taste good. And guess what? You can eat them with other things. They don't have to be eaten by themselves. Right? So, when I say this, write this down, okay? Clothe your carbs. Clothe your carbs, okay? What does that mean? That means if you're going to eat something starchy or sugary, they need to have clothes on them. What are these clothes you're talking about? Remember that line we drew between the first three items and the second two? And the last two? The clothes are the OG big three: fiber, protein, fat, okay? If you must have a meal that involves all of these elements together, that's great. Why? Because you're still consuming fiber, protein, and fat in the meal, and they help mitigate the glucose spike, okay? But if you are having a meal that does separate these items out, it's important that you eat the first three first, okay? All right. So, we now get into our week one topic. Well, that was a lot of talking. All right, seeing some yawns out there, some rolling of the eyes, that's okay. All right, week one is savory breakfast. All right, so savory breakfast. Why savory? Hopefully by now you've heard me talk about why we need to save the sugar for the last thing. Not omit it, but save it for the last. Okay, savory breakfast. Okay, so let's break it down a little bit further. Nutritious breakfast, okay? Food that helps us in the morning, helps us have energy, helps us have brightness, attentiveness, okay? helps us not bloat in the morning and feel bleh, you know? So we want to make sure that we pay attention to what we eat first thing in the morning. For y'all who fast in the morning, it's even more important, where our body is in an extended period of not eating anything, okay? So when our body is coming out of rest, it's coming from a fast. So unless you're walking around the house in the middle of the night, sleepwalking, and you're right in the fridge, you're more than likely not going to be eating in the middle of the night, right? So our body is fasting, it's repairing, it's recovering. The first thing that it consumes, it absorbs like that, okay? So we need to make sure that we're aware of what we're feeding our body first thing in the day. It does matter, okay? So this brings up another point, the molecule of sugar. Because most people, when they eat breakfast in the morning, there's some type of sweet, right? Including fruit, okay? When sugar is broken down in the body, the molecule of sugar, so we're looking at glucose, sucrose, fructose, all of these molecules are broken down the same in the body, okay? Thus, they must come at the end of the eating order if we're going to eat them, all right? So, let's look at some examples of what's not a savory breakfast. We all had our favorite cereal growing up, right? I loved Reese's Puffs and Fruit Loops. And then I got older and I started eating Special K. I still like Special K. It has a special place in my heart. But sometimes we go to Starbucks, we run out of time. Starbucks, any fans of Starbucks? Seven Brew, Onyx. I know we're in Northwest Arkansas, so y'all online, that's an inside joke. But we might go to Starbucks and get a pastry, right? Both of these things are sugary. If we're getting, a Frappuccino or a Macchiato, right? And why is Smoothie King on here? Okay? We talked about this sugar in fruit, right? So when we blend or when we mash something, it breaks down the fiber content, okay? Not saying that there's no fiber in there, it just breaks it down. So if we're looking at digestion and how our body operates, if there's no barrier between our body absorbing sugar, it's going to absorb that sugar even faster, right? So the fiber in fruit mostly comes from the skin and the flesh of the fruit, okay? So if we can eat whole fruit, it would be more preferable, again, if we're following this method, all right? But if you must have a smoothie, we got to talk about savory smoothies, okay? I'm not talking about those green smoothies. I hardly see anybody drinking those anymore, but not to hate on those who do enjoy those from time to time. Green smoothies are awesome, okay? But we look at smoothie as building it around protein and fat, okay? Whether that's protein powder and nuts with a little flavored fruit, okay? Excuse me, fruit to flavor the smoothie instead of basing the smoothie on fruit itself. All right. So what does a savory breakfast look like? We're looking at some options here. We have avocado toast, which is one of my personal favorites. Okay. Love avocado toast. It can be as simple or as complex as you want it to be. Okay. So avocado toast is pretty much just avocado on bread, right? You can add what you want after the fact. Doesn't have to be fancy or bougie. And we have a second option. We call this a non-spike granola bowl, okay? So we're omitting the granola in this instance because of the starch content that oatmeal has, okay? And we're substituting nuts and seeds in there, adding that omega-3 fat content because again, we know about glucose and how it's broken down slower and more efficiently if we consume fiber, protein, or fat first. And the yogurt, if in this method, we will look at a non-flavored yogurt. That's what the fruit is there for, is to help flavor the yogurt and everything else. And we have almond, right? Who doesn't like an almond? All right. And I would like to mention, at the end of this class, at the end of the 4 weeks, I will be providing you guys with awesome recipes to follow each one of these weeks' healthy habits, okay? And we will be getting everybody one of these books, okay, from Miss Jessie Inchauspé, okay, which has over 100 recipes in it, okay, and it also breaks down what I'm talking about throughout the course of these 4 weeks. And that includes y'all online as well. We didn't forget about y'all. We love y'all. Okay? So, savory science. We're looking at some more graphs here. Okay? Look at the first one. Espresso and different types of baked goods. The first one is an espresso with a chocolate pastry. Nothing in the espresso, just a chocolate pastry. Okay? Look at the glucose spike in that. Versus eating not even a whole wheat, not a complex carbohydrate bread, ham croissant. Okay? So you're just looking at savory versus sweet in that instance. Okay? Looking at the glucose spike. And then as we kind of mentioned before, the oats versus using seeds and nuts or just fruit with full fat yogurt. Okay? Again, thinking about how the fat in the yogurt and in the nuts and seeds help with that digestion. Okay? We're looking at dried mango versus fresh mango. Well, dried mango, that's pretty good, right? Okay? But a lot of times, dried fruits have a lot of added sugar into them. Okay? So we just got to be on the lookout for that. All right? And if you do have that, again, go back to the order. The awesome thing about this glucose method is that we can still enjoy the foods we love. Right? We can still enjoy the foods we love. You're just thinking about the order, being a little bit more intentional with how we order our eating. Okay, so how to implement. This is kind of a breakdown of what we talked about so far. Okay? It's like the Cliff Notes version. So, choose a savory instead of something sugary, or eat it before. Build your meal around protein. Okay? This is going to really help click some things together for some people. If we build our breakfast around protein, everything else will take care of itself. Right? And protein in the morning is a staple, especially for us Americans, right? So, eggs. You maybe have some prosciutto or sausage in the morning. Maybe have a little scramble going, right? If you want to add some veggies in there, right? And I know that eating salad in the morning may be a little intense for some people, okay? Not saying that that's necessary. Remember, if we stay within those OG big three, the fiber, protein, and fat, we'll be in good shape, all right? And when it comes to coffee, as you saw in the example, that coffee didn't have any sugar in it, right? But if we are adding creamer or sugar to our coffee, let's try to preface it for after we eat protein and fat in that breakfast, okay? Because we're trying to jumpstart your day. I want you to feel good when you eat breakfast. Find confidence in what you eat, okay? All right, here's some more savory breakfast examples. Cream cheese on a bagel, but I would like to mention that the cream cheese should be full fat cream cheese, not non-fat or low fat. Why? Because research has shown that the fatty content in yogurt, cream cheese especially, helps with that breakdown of digestion and the starchy and sugary molecules. Okay? And then example number 2. I know that doesn't look like a green smoothie, but in fact is. How? The berries give it the color that we're looking for. Now a lot of people are turned on to the fact of green drinks, right? But this is an avocado-based smoothie. You would never know that just by looking at it, okay? So sometimes you got to play a trick on your own mind, right? Okay. All right, y'all. Coming to the conclusion of this class, I want to send you off with some information that I think is vitally important into adopting the glucose method. Number 1 is to have a sit-down discussion with your family to take it seriously, okay? Because the research has shown in most homes, when one individual is trying to eat completely different from everyone else in the household, because most households don't just have one mouth to feed, okay? It is very difficult for that one person to shop and to cook and to prep all their meals separate from everybody else. Now, this is case by case, right? Not everybody's like that. But just to make sure that we are aware of its importance to tell our family, hey, this is not a quick time fix. This is not a temporary fad diet. We are striving for lifestyle change, okay? And that, again, takes baby steps, one at a time. All right? So, number 2, pick out one or two of these strategies that we've talked about today, whether that's order of eating or savory breakfast. And hey, if you're a rock star, you got both of them, right? But pick out one or more, challenge yourself to slowly adopt it this week. And that's what you guys will see on your handout of the daily log. And for y'all watching online, make sure you check out the calendar link. There's an attachment in there, okay, that says Glucose Method Daily Log, okay? Download that, print it out, and you'll see it's very simple, easy to read, easy to fill out. Shouldn't take you more than 5 minutes, okay? And it is in response to you adopting the savory breakfast method, okay? If you guys have any questions that we don't get to today, please feel free to email me or call me at my extension shown on this slide. All right. Now, we have a little bit of time to go over to have Q&A. So if there's any questions from the audience, both online and in person, please send those in the chat if you're on WebEx, and if you haven't written them down, you just have it off the top of the dome, spit them at me if you're here in person with me. Okay. Question from WebEx about honey, if honey is good for you. Now, cool thing about honey, okay? Pay attention to where that honey is taken from, okay? I'm talking about the location of that honey, right? Why? Because when bees pollinate, they also help with the antibodies, right, in our body. So that honey derived from the bees pollinating is going to help our body. Why and how? Because regionally, if bees are pollinating in the same area that we live in, those antibodies that are going to help will only help if they're from the region that we live in. Okay, so if you're looking at buying local honey, sometimes it says local and it's from 5 counties away. It's not going to be as beneficial for you. Now looking at the sugar content in honey, we're still treating it the same as in the order of eating. If you can save it for last, or if you're having a savory breakfast, you can add it into the fiber, protein, and fat. Okay, you can even put some, if you wanted to, into your Greek yogurt bowl. All right. Okay, so the question was, for me personally, what does a regular breakfast look like? So I just kind of go through my daily routine. When I wake up in the morning, I drink a glass of water, and then if I'm having time to prep meal in the morning, I usually go for an easy whole wheat bagel, put it in the toaster, let it cook, spread my avocado on it, and I might put some salt and pepper on it, maybe some red pepper flakes. I like spicy. And if I have any boiled eggs prepped, which boiled eggs are very easy to make, you can make them overnight and then have them in the refrigerator, take them to work, peel them at work, or in the morning when you wake up if you have time to eat and prep breakfast. Usually that's my go-to. So, and if I have time or if I'm still hungry, I might have a little piece of fruit to go with that after I eat my avocado toast. So the question was, she eats avocado, cream cheese, and you said egg? Cottage cheese and an egg in the morning. And she asked if you have to put bread in there. The answer is no. Just as long as you have one of the OG3, the fiber, protein, and fat in there, but you have egg and you have avocado, okay, and cottage cheese, right? You're good. Unless you just want to add bread for flavor and texture, you don't have to add bread. 2 questions from WebEx. Give me one of them. Awesome question. The question was, how early should you eat your veggie starter before your meal? The cool thing about this little hack right here of eating fiber first is you don't have to time it out. As soon as you finish eating your salad or veggie starter, go right into eating whatever you want to eat next. Okay? You said there was another question?
What are your thoughts about stevia leaf?
Okay. Question was, what do I think about stevia leaf? You said not the Not the mix, but the pure stuff. Pure stuff, good stuff. All right. Stevia is an awesome alternative. However, because it is still sugar, we need to treat it the same as far as the order of eating goes. That's pretty consistent across the board. Okay? So not saying it's bad or good, just saying that when sugar is broken down in the body, it's treated the same. So the question was to recap about the whole fat conversation. Okay, so we're looking at dairy products, and we're looking at the research of how consuming dairy products affects the body and digestion, and we have the consideration of what fat, protein, and fiber do in the body. We want to look at options that have full fat. Okay, why? Because we're looking at the fat content, and fat is important in the process of digestion when looking at all of these elements, all 5 of them, and we're looking at making sure we're not getting something that's super sugary or something that doesn't have fat at all, because it's going to have something to fill that fat void in there. So we'd rather lean on the fat side than lean on the non-fat side when it comes to applying this method. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. And if there is anything that you guys have further questions on, or we're talking about something and it sparked a question in your head, please feel free to email me, or again, contact me with my contact information on this slide, and I'll be happy to help. Okay. And if I don't think that I can answer the question based off of my scope of practice, or if I just haven't done the research on it, I will do my due diligence and get back to you ASAP. All right. Okay, so the question was, I really like cream and sugar in my coffee. Should I wait to consume the coffee till after I've eaten? I would say yes, okay, because of the sugar content in the coffee. That's the only reason, okay? If you were to just consume black coffee, or let's say you're a tea drinker, I love tea, but you don't put any honey or stevia in it, it's fine to drink the tea or coffee during or before, unless it affects your body in a way where it's uncomfortable, right? Because sometimes coffee can make people go to the bathroom sooner than they want to. So you want to really make sure to how coffee makes you feel, as well as what you put in your coffee. Okay. So the question was, if you're trying to shy away from eating too much sugar late in the day, is there a time frame that I recommend to finish eating or consuming sugar by? I would say if you're following this method and you're eating sugar as a dessert and not a snack, our digestion usually spans about anywhere from 2 to 4 hours. Okay, so if you're going to bed at 7, you finish dinner at 5, and you have your dessert, I say that's a pretty good time gap if you're following the method, okay, and letting those 3 molecules, fiber, protein, and fat, help with digestion. You're not going to have as adverse effects as you would just having that as a snack or standalone. Question was about tortillas, okay? Because tortillas are either made from wheat or corn, those 2 food products have starch, right? So we're just looking at the food from a molecule standpoint. We have to break it down to make sure we're looking at it from molecules and not necessarily the name of the food, right? What the food is, right? It's starch. So if we're looking at starch and in the order of eating, we want to try to consume that at the end. Now, obviously you don't eat tortillas by themselves. I know that. Or you usually have something on it.
Corn tortillas, not flour.
Corn tortillas?
Yes, you need flour.
Okay. So as long as you're having fat, protein, and fiber in there, or 1 or 2 out of 3, if not all 3, with that tortilla, you should be good. Okay? If we're looking at digestion, right? Which is what we're trying to become more cognizant of and more intentional about, is how we're treating the digestion in our body, right? How our body responds to food. Okay, are gluten-free oats better for breakfast than regular oats? I would say only if you have a gluten allergy. Again, I'm not a specialist on food sensitivities or food allergies. So before I say anything else, that would be my My only suggestion is if you have a gluten allergy, to make sure that you are eating accordingly. Any other questions? Well, I'd like to preview the next week for you. I'm not going to tell you anything about it. If you really want to know, you can look through the PowerPoint slides. But what it is vinegar. Okay, vinegar and how it plays a role in what we've talked about so far: glucose curve leveling or mitigating glucose spikes in the body. Okay, so TBD. Thank you guys so much for having me. Thank you guys for participating online, being really engaging with the questions. I really do appreciate that. And I look forward to seeing you guys next week. Have an awesome rest of the week.